It's yesterday's news, post-traumatic reactions, pop culture commentary from a Gen X prodigy. Yeah, I'm giving myself a little bit too much credit, but we're reacting to yesterday's news. Did that just happen? What the hell's going on? I didn't even know it looked like that. That's what this is about, and we're gonna have fun talking about yesterday. Warning! Adult content! Cover your ears, cover your children's ears, cover your dog's ears. So when did it become fashionable to be a crook? When did criminality become the blissful recall that we all are summoning forth? You know, this is a post-traumatic reaction because my life was defined by these perceptions, these perverted perceptions of blissful recall to a criminal history my family had for a couple of generations. And so right now I am actually beside myself having this weird identity crisis because I've been carrying generational guilt for the criminality of my father and my grandfather, and now I watch as society applauds and lauds criminals left and right. And so I just have this question. When the fuck did that happen? And how the fuck is that happening? And I guess I lied. I have more than one question. Why the fuck is that happening? I make no apologies for my cursing at this moment because it's a deep epigenetic truth in my family. My grandfather died in prison. He was a violent man. He broke my father. My father broke me. I grew up listening to that story, and it's the story that you tell that leaves the biggest impression on your children, right? Because you're defining one of their definitions of reality through that frame of reference, through the story you tell your children. You are defining certain aspects of their paradigms and their perceptions. And so I take issue. Where's my hand? I take issue. If you're watching, I'm trying to put my finger up like Brainy Smurf, but I take issue to these stories. I myself had a epiphany as a young father with my oldest daughter, and it blew my mind because I watched in real time myself making the mistake of blissful recall, harkening back to criminality in the past of my family like it was a badge of honor. My family got away with this, but we didn't. You know what I mean? My grandfather was incarcerated. My dad was in and out of everything. Psych wards, jail. Both those gentlemen did not blissfully recall anything. Their ignorance, that was a tough one to say. Their ignorance actually blissfully manifested some bullshit for my family. Generational bullshit. I know a lot of people can identify, and that's the reason why I'm talking about this. When did it become fashionable to just engage in criminality? You know what I mean? So on my end, nobody talks about this, so we're going to talk about it. When you're the child of that story, you are brought up already as a second-class citizen because the children of criminals are usually cast in that shadow. And what I mean by that is, you go through life and you observe, you listen, you see the story. You slowly, as you begin to interact with the rest of the world, you slowly understand, crap. My family story's on the other side, wearing the black hat, and we're the bad cowboys. You know what I mean? You just know, you learn that, rape is bad, theft is bad, assault is bad, murder is bad, and then you hear these stories directly applicable to your genetics and your family. And so as a young child, when that's all you know and that's your story, and then you find out that you're the bad person because of your family history, that sucks. It defines your reality. And so you move forward in a deficit. And I'm going to say it because I lived it. I began to notice the reactions from other people in the world when they hear that your dad's a criminal, your grandfather's a criminal, your grandmothers are prostitutes. We have this whole couple of generations in my family history that involves, prostitution and public destruction and hints at the mafia and running for your life. Apparently, I was born on the run, or so the story goes. And so there's this family history where there are reckonings for crimes. People are going to prison. My grandfather was blowing up refineries or something. There's a whole history that I spent a good decade trying to not cover up, but get in front of the search results, because back in the day you would search up my last name and my grandfather's imperfections and whatnot would show up, and it was rather embarrassing because back in the day shame was real and it was legit. And that's why I have these weird befuddled thoughts of what is going on today. That's why I call it a post-traumatic reaction. That's why this whole segment is called post-traumatic reactions, because I'm talking too fast once again. My life exists within mental health. Not only hereditarily, I don't even know if that's a real word. Let's say it slowly together. Ready? Hereditarily. Anyway, whether that's part of it, whether it's, childhood trauma related, all I know is that the kitschy, weird mental health part of me is real. You know what I mean? I've unfortunately suffered those symptoms. And those symptoms sometimes put you and others in danger. So that's why I'm very honest, vulnerable, and real about this mental health management. And guess what? In the world at large, mental health management is a very real, every second, every minute, every day kind of thing. You are assessing what's going on. You're assessing how you're going to react to it. You're assessing if your perceptions are even real. See, that's the thing that a lot of people take for granted. And we're almost going to slip into a mental health moment, but this segment is true to itself. It's called post-traumatic reactions. It's because you've got to, in your mind, equivocate what this is. How is this a thing? Especially when we speak of the modern terms of criminality, right? Because in my history, criminality is very real, right? So I have this letter that was given to me by my family, and it's a letter that my grandfather wrote from prison detailing part of his journey into criminality, and it started back in the Great Depression. So the United States was suffering through the Great Depression, and people were upon very, very rough times, and my grandfather writes in his letter about how his choice to dive into criminality was his. His family was a good family. They were supportive. He just said, not verbatim, but he's like, fuck it, and so his life goes down a very dark and tumultuous path with multiple wives, multiple children from these multiple wives, lots of prostitution, lots of criminality, lots of violence. And we'll speak to these stories later because it's unpacking the story that you were told. That's how you can edit, right? Especially in this arena where it's midlife, right? Midlife virus is talking about, what am I doing now? You know what I mean? From 40 to 60, right? We're going to have a lot of discussions about 40 to 60. We're going to harken back because, everybody in my age range right now within this decade we're all Gen X. So you're going to hear a lot of Gen X opinion theory, management. I love saying Gen X theory because that's what it is. It's just us capitulating. What the hell am I doing? Right? So post-traumatic reaction to how, I guess the word is back-ass word, we're treating criminality, right? Back in the day, you went to prison. My grandfather died in prison. Matter of fact, he was firebombed in his cell, lost a leg, and then died 6 months later due to cardiac arrest in his cell. And so it's a very crazy story, what's going on with my grandfather and in his criminal past. But I'll tell you, it's violent. It's incredibly violent. It left epigenetic scars in my family. I've got relatives who have no perception of my name like I do, right? And my name is perceived the way it is as I perceive it because that was the definition that was given to me. Prostitution, violence, criminality, death, murder, manipulation, narcissism, pain, and more pain. And so how do you internalize that as a kid? And then can you imagine? That's your definition. And then here you are. You've lived a span of your life. You've done, I'm almost 50. I just turned 49. And I've raised 4 kids. You know what I mean? I've done things. I've had different careers, and I've attained goals and whatnot. I've almost died a half a dozen times. And so you look at this definition and you say, hey, wait a minute. I've been carrying this generational guilt and shame, you know what I mean? Because it's sins of my father. You can't help but to internalize that. That's the thing, right? That's why so many young men and women who come from violent childhood trauma, they carry the same scars that I do, right? There's some kind of, I don't want to call it survivor syndrome. I'm sure everyone out there has a wonderful name for it. That's why I'm not going to look it up right now. I could, but I don't want to, right? Authenticity is these moments where you're like, oh, help me find the answer. That's the cool thing about it. So anyway, I know lots of people are just like me. And I'm sure a lot of people, just like me, are asking this question all of a sudden. When did criminality become common? When did it become a reward? Do you know what I mean? When did it become a reward? I remember, the littlest thing would put you in jail, and now the biggest thing gets you out of jail, right? I grew up with incredible violence in my home, right? My mother, unfortunately, bore a lot of that physical violence, sexual violence, and my dad, was kind of ruthless about it. And today, being that young little boy who heard those things happening, you know what I mean, in the other room, when you live in a mobile home, you hear all kinds of stuff. And when you've seen violence and violence is explained to you, you get an idea. Come on, man, I'm a Gen X kid. Violence was everywhere. And so my poor mom is enduring this hell, and you go forward in life as a man, and then now here I am seeing guys in and out of prison, assaulting women, in and out of prison, raping women, in and out of prison, assaulting children, in and out of prison all day long. What is that kind of trigger in me? What is that? Yeah, I'll tell you what it is. It's baffling. It's absolutely baffling. Not only is it baffling, it's another societal letdown, right? The Calvary, once again, didn't even come. You're that little boy being raised in this whack-ass story of criminality and prostitution and murder and, weird, wacky shit you can't even tell is true, but you watching violence, you're experiencing violence, you know what's wrong, and nobody comes to help you because back then, kids weren't really listened to. We were more like property back then. When we speak of women's rights, you also need to lump in children's rights with that too. So domestic violence wasn't on the radar when I was a kid. So unfortunately, my mom, me, at times my sister got lumped into that and nobody was there. And so it is a double failure of the Calvary to now become a man and watch this kind of criminality that was ignored when you were a child. Now it looks like it's being ignored once again, and that makes absolutely no sense to me. That's why it's a post-traumatic reaction, because here I am trying to react to this reality. How is this becoming a thing? Because I know the argument. The argument is, well, they were brought up with childhood trauma and they don't know how to behave or act any other way. And this is an epigenetic, curse. And these poor, aggressors are victims. Yeah, I get it. I totally get that. I get that because I've lived that example and I've walked that path. And so I get it. It's, man, I tell you, if there's nobody out there mentoring and explaining and clarifying and pointing it out, you're going to have a lot of violent young men and women acting out and mimicking and following and perpetuating, right, and propagating what they've been taught, because that's how the human experience is. We usually emulate what we've been taught. And if you've been taught violence, 50-50 chance, you'll emulate it. There's another story, though. There's a story of empathy and forgiveness, and the people that are, like me, who snap out of it. It took me a minute, though. I tell you, the programming that happens to you when you're young is incredibly difficult to rewrite, because a lot of the times it is your regular operating system. It's just going on in the background. You wake up, you boot up, and your parameters are up there running around. And so if you've got these early childhood parameters, that's why people say your personality is locked in by 5. So it's important for us to lead by example in these early years, right? Because now we have generational criminality, because it's been going on so long. I talk of epigenetics all the time. Your DNA evolves in so many ways you're not aware. And a lot of it is behavioral, right? Aggression, being timid, being somebody who is an adventurer, or you're an intellectual. All these things, they can be kind of tweaked along the way of evolution, right? And so let's say you create a culture of happy, loving, supportive, intellectual, kind of family bonding stuff, and that's able to happen for generations and generations. That will change the code. Your DNA will be a little bit more on the bright side, right? However, the adverse is totally true, right? And so in families like mine, where you've got generational trauma, generational narcissistic, weird-ass mental health, the bad reaction, that's what I call it. I am going to label it as a bad reaction, because what you're doing is you're taking out your pain and you're pouring it into others, and that's not what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to be pouring your pain into others. You're actually supposed to be creating peace and pouring that peace into yourself, and then sharing with everybody this badass thing of peace. I've got a big picture of peace here. Let me pour it around. That's the idea ultimately, because being the product of the pouring your pain around approach sucks for me. It sucks for me. It sucks for a lot of you. There's a lot of you out there that are just like me, that are pissed off, and you're pissed off for a huge part of your life because criminality wasn't contained, right? These abuses, these trespasses weren't contained. And so here I am. I'm going to circle back around, which I do this all the time. I don't know if it's my mental health. I don't know if it's just the way I talk. Probably the way I talk. I like to circle back and be like, God damn it! Yeah, so here we are. Why is criminality so popular? Why are rapists getting out of jail in days? Why are people not even going to jail? And why did I carry... Was I wrong for carrying the shame and guilt of a real crappy fucking evil family history for a couple of generations? Huge question mark. Was that my mistake? Did I give in to something? I didn't think so. I thought there was some kind of honor-bound, journey, a quest that I was to go on to say, no, we will break this chain of evil. You know what I mean? That's what I'm doing, right? I'm holding this up, going on a quest, saying, no way. I am going to block my family and my children from it. and start anew. And I tell you, it was not easy. I sucked at it, and I bear that responsibility. I apologize a lot to my children for being, not late to the party, but I just wish I could have done it quicker. That's the thing. So as a post-traumatic reactor, right, I just wonder, what is this doing for the bigger picture? How does rewarding criminality with less consequences, how is that going to help anybody? Because my grandfather was a career criminal, and he completely shredded my dad, right? And my dad had all these criminal ideations and practices. And so one of the things that really stood out in my life, and I need everybody to listen right now, okay? Just listen right now to what I'm about to say. There was a saying that my dad and my grandfather would throw around. They'd kick this saying around, and it's this: every time you get caught, you get away with it 1,000 times. Okay, so every time you get caught, you get away with it 1,000 times. And so here we are, letting a guy out of jail in a revolving system where they just in and out, and that's just the one time that they were caught. Or if they have the rap sheet where it's the 115th time they were caught, every time they were caught, 1,000 times they got away with it. And my grandfather taught my father, my grandfather taught my father that was the advantage of crime and thievery. That was one of the guild secrets, is that nobody was paying attention and that the odds are in your favor. And that's something that we desperately need to realign and redefine with today's youth, right? To fix the generational problems that we exist in within today, we have to change the definitions. You have to tell people, yeah, sure, you can get away with it 1,000 times per every time you get caught, but what the fuck is that? I'm sorry, but super blunt, what is that? What kind of behavior is that you're looking to get away with something and pull something off? Legitimate stuff is super easy, just so you know. Doing things legitimately is super easy, and it builds things within your mind that you have no idea how powerful they are, right? And so when you steal something, you're stealing this experience from yourself. The Wile E. Coyote, that's a survivalist. That's a survival thing. That's a survivalist mentality. Some would call it a poverty mindset, but I see it as a survival mentality because I know what it is to be poor. I know what it is to steal strawberries from the neighbor's yard. I know what it is to steal because you're hungry. I know what it is to steal because you thought that's what your father wanted as a definition, because that's, generational criminality. If I'm not good enough because I'm not you, then am I good enough if I am you? I went through that whole struggle as a young teenager and a young man. I had no idea what defined me because I desperately wanted my father to love me like everybody, right? Until you understand that contract isn't always signed on both ends, right? So post-traumatically, here I am reacting. You know what I mean? You're watching a trigger in real time. You're watching a man who's like, wait a second. I did all this work to change the definition of my criminal past and my epigenetic, debt to society. And now look, I'm halfway through my life and this thing has been turned completely upside down, and people are stealing and mobbing and stealing and hurting and killing and stealing and more stealing. Whew, my goodness. My dad one time threatened to kick me out of the house if I fucked up one more time. And so in my mind, I took that as an opportunity to go to the supermarket a few blocks away and shoplift, so I could get that mistake and have that one more time and get kicked out of my house. It worked and it didn't work. It worked that I got caught. It worked that my My mother was called. It worked in the sense that I was able to reach out, but I didn't get kicked out of my house, and it didn't save me shit. You know what I mean? But I do understand what that mindset looks like. And I guess what we all need to reckon with is, how do we alter the mindset? How do we get back to honor? How do we get back to our positive ethos where we honor each other, we build each other up, we do things the right way, right? Because this reaction to criminality, the reaction we're having to criminality right now is only creating pain and perpetuity. Right? We are righting generational wrongs by not doing what is right. And I think that's a huge mistake. And so here I am discussing this post-traumatic reaction from a guy who, excuse me, became the prototype, right? I had to deny that DNA. And here we are today. And it looks like 23andMe is go fuck yourself. Sorry about the language, but you know what I mean? What a huge affront to victims and people like myself who grew up with criminality and violence and all that. And now what? Nothing? Nothing? You're not going to do nothing. So then what? What? How do I have any respect for all of this unless that's the, the plan? Is that the plan? I sound like a conspiracy theorist now, but is that the plan, to break down society and reward criminals so the regular man, woman, and child and pet dog and kitty will lose faith in your leadership? What is that? What kind of plan is that? And how did you become, in a leadership position if that's your plan? Accountability, is sustainable. Integrity is sustainable. Knowledge is sustainable. You can do all these things in perpetuity. I keep on saying that word, perpetuity, because yes, you can do this over and over and over again. You can recreate and scale good things. And so what we're doing right now is we are not scaling good things. And I think that needs to change. Somebody's got to get up in there, up in the in the control booth and reverse it. If you liked that sound effect, there's more where that come from. There's lots more where that sound effect comes from. And so, hey, I want to thank you very much for joining me on this post-traumatic reaction. What the hell is going on with criminality, and why are we rewarding it so much? Catch me next time. Thank you for joining MidlifeVirus.com. And now a word from our sponsors. Funky Puppy Productions. If you need a production done, Funky Puppy Productions can do it for you. Visit us at funkypuppyproductions.com. Triple Dream Nipple Cream. 100% natural, 100% made for you. The Triple Dream Nipple Cream team is 100% dedicated to making your nipple dreams come true. 100% edible, you can share it with your crew. Triple Dream Nipple Cream is meant for you on any part of you that you want it to do. Triple Dream Nipple Cream. Take it to the beach. Pump it in public. Triple Dream Nipple Cream is the dream your nipples have been waiting for. Order yours today. Now with 50 SPF.
We've got the gear for whatever realm you decide to reside. InterdimensionalOutfitters.com.
This has been another post-traumatic reaction segment brought to you by Midlife Virus Podcast and MidlifeVirus.com. Make sure you follow us on Facebook at Midlife Virus on Facebook. You can also find Midlife Virus on Instagram. The exact same name, Midlife Virus on Instagram. If you want to watch the show, you can find us on YouTube at My Midlife Virus on YouTube. Once again, thank you for joining me as I join myself. This is Midlife Virus.